All during her time as a campaign operative, then communications director for the White House, the media had an intense interest in Hope Hicks, focusing on her former modeling career, close relationship with the president, and her love life. Now the New York Times is facing backlash for a recent article about Hicks. This gauzy, model-like photo of Hope Hicks, along with a sympathetic headline about whether she should testify, prompted an outcry from a flurry of lefty news outlets, claiming the New York Times piece was uncritical and that the glamorous photo was inappropriate. On top of that, reporter Maggie Haberman wrote that Hicks faces an existential question about whether to comply. Cue the Sartre experts. That word was quickly changed to crucial question. Speaking on CNN, Haberman noted that reporters don't pick the photos, but seemed to acknowledge there was room for reproach.
We are not above criticism, and we deserve it, and we hear it. I think the tenor has gotten extremely personal, and I think that's unfortunate.
I heard her kind of admitting there that there was room for criticism. But I mean, this has reached the point of fetishism, really. I mean, their fascination with Hope Hicks. And you mumbled you didn't have a problem with the photograph. They were like making her be in the image, this idolatry. It's like that's what they were doing with her. Most people have horrible pictures if they were just in the news. They don't care what the picture looks like. This was a posed.
You know, I didn't see it that way. I saw that as her standing in front of some wall where she was working and looking at her cell phone. That's what she looks like. She didn't have like a party spaghetti strap thing on. She had her shoulders were covered. That's how she dresses. She uses a lot of makeup. This is who she is.
They didn't bring in Annie Leibovitz to shoot her for that story.
I personally have a problem with the story. But the only issue that I have, Maggie Haberman, I think that she did a relatively good job. A lot of people are criticizing her. I think the only thing she's guilty of is not getting on board with what the mainstream media thinks should be critical of President Bush, or excuse me, of President Trump, and she should be doing that. She didn't do that. So she frequently does annoy the president, and she's now annoying the left. So that means she's probably, I think, as a journalist, doing her job if she's annoying both sides of the spectrum.
You know, I'd say she must have been and continues to be the greatest anonymous source the Trump people ever produced. Because, I mean, she gets this treatment over and over and over again. I think the criticism of Maggie Haberman has been way over the top. I think she's a terrific reporter. At the same time, I do think that she's tonally off sometimes, and I think she was tonally off here, and I think that's often true of the Times coverage of the Trump administration in general. You often hear complaints from the left that the Times is normalizing really abnormal behavior, and I think there's something to it.
I didn't. They're tough on her.
I read that article, and it was about the fact that she's been subpoenaed to testify further, and because of her centrality in the Trump universe, it could be very significant. So whether or not she complies or tries to fight the subpoena, as all the Trumpkins are under orders to do now, is a significant news item. So I didn't get that at all.
She examined it in a factual and legal way, too, I thought, in the story.
And, you know, Maggie Haberman is the best in the business. And I don't know her personally, but I know people who do. I'm thoroughly convinced she's an even better person than she is a reporter. For her to be subjected to trolling and these attacks, her mother's a PR person at a firm that years ago did some work for Trump, so she's compromised. She's hoarding material for her book. What a bunch of garbage. Shame on the people doing that.
Couple things worth mentioning. So there were actually three factors, I think, that made a lot of people, including myself, raise an eyebrow at this piece. There was the photo, which was actually an old photo, I think, from a year or two ago that was reused. There was the photo in conjunction with the reference to an existential question. So you have her looking like she's just, you know, almost like the thinker, right? It's the equivalent of that.
Looking pensive.
And then in the lead, if I recall correctly, you have a reference to Hope Hicks's enduring mystique. So she was laying it on a little bit thick. Maggie Haberman is a great reporter, but it was a treatment that most people who think about ignoring a subpoena do not get. And I think it's totally reasonable to say that it was a little too friendly. I agree with you about her being a source, and I would just close by saying maybe if the New York Times had a public editor, who could call the paper to account for perceived misdeeds, maybe the pushback on Twitter wouldn't be as severe. Remember, the publisher said, we're getting rid of the public editor. Twitter will take care of it. And Twitter is taking care of it.
That's a good point.
Twitter's taking care of nothing.
Well, true.